a sweet and pure college student.
She was literally the most innocent and genuine person I've ever known.
Viciously attacked in her own home.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I mean, this child went through hell.
Who would have a reason to want to kill this girl?
Police are desperate to find the killer before he strikes again.
It's panic.
There is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have them.
But a dark trail of evidence.
He actually wound up weeping out of a fetal position.
This is bizarre. This is strange.
Leads them to a suspect
This was someone hiding in plain sight.
they could have never imagined.
No one would have known that, not anybody.
The city of Arlington is the home of 2 professional sports teams and a major amusement park.
There's something for everybody. And if you can't find something to do, then you've got a problem.
But in early April 1994, this idyllic community was rocked to its core.
911.
And it started when police received a 911 call from the Holly Park apartment complex.
911, page 25.
Woke up 3:30 in the morning, smelling smoke. I walk into my living room. There's so much smoke that I can't see. It's panic. There's a fire. We need to get out.
Residents quickly evacuate the building as firefighters arrive to battle the blaze.
You're totally helpless. You just sit there and watch everything go up in flames.
I still think about it. Just how close I came to dying.
Firefighters track the fire to its source, an apartment on the 2nd floor. Once inside, they make a horrific discovery.
Firefighters discovered a body in the bedroom. This was not just someone falling asleep in bed smoking. This was something more.
Homicide investigators are quickly summoned and try to make sense of the devastating scene.
I was informed of what the fire department had found and what they reported. We had a body inside of a burning home. Detective Stanton and I make entry into the apartment. The fire is out, but there's still a lot of damage.
Virtually everything has got like a coating of this black, nasty soot.
Fire marshals could actually smell the gasoline and were able to see pour patterns. This was an intentionally set fire.
The trail of destruction leads all the way to the bed.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I've seen bad crime scenes, and I've seen crime scenes involving people that were burnt in fires. This was elevated. A young lady who you could see, even with the smoke damage and the burn damage, you could still see that this was a victim of a very brutal sexual assault. The body was laying on her back on the bed. The positioning is consistent with sexual assault. She had trauma to her face, as though she had been physically assaulted. Clearly there was a puncture mark in the middle of her chest. This child went through hell.
It was like nothing I've ever seen. You know, who would do something as horrible as this?
A lot of evidence was destroyed simply because of the fire damage. But we found what we believe might have been the murder weapon. There was a knife in the sink.
But fire damage to the knife has robbed investigators of the forensic evidence needed to link it to the killer.
Had that fire not been set, we probably would have had latent prints. No telling what we would have had.
Investigators collect the knife for testing and manage to salvage some papers that survived the inferno. For detectives, the most important goal is to identify their victim.
We found out that that apartment was in fact leased and occupied by one occupant, identified as Missy Gruball, 19-year-old college student from Burleson.
I can remember standing on the lawn, and I said, "There's Missy's car, but she's not out here with us. She was not accounted for."
So we had a general idea who our victim was, but that was not confirmed.
This body was so distorted that they had to use a forensic odontologist to confirm Missy as the victim.
Once we've identified the victim as Missy Gruball, we talked to her family in Burleson, and it's gut-wrenching. Missy's mother was devastated.
I had a daughter myself. That sort of hits home.
As investigators meet with Missy's family, word of her death spreads through the small community.
When I heard the news, my heart just dropped. Missy was so innocent and so pure and such an honest soul. She was so much fun, very friendly, nurturing. She would have given anything to help anybody. She was literally the most genuine person I've ever known. We were very active in church, she and I both were. Missy was very strong in her faith, very moral. She was always the person to do the right thing, always.
In high school, her strength went beyond her faith.
Missy was very focused. She was a very hard worker. That's how she was so successful in school. She was in the high school band. She played the French horn, and she was amazing at it.
Even as a teenager, Missy had a clear vision of what she wanted and the drive to get it.
She wanted to go to the University of Texas at Arlington, and she wanted to get her own apartment. But she didn't want to burden her mother financially. So Missy was working to support herself to afford to be able to go to school.
But even though she wanted to stand on her own, Missy's heart stayed close to home.
She probably spoke with her mom every day on the phone. Missy and her mother were very close. They were a team in life and treasured each other.
You cannot describe the pain that Missy's mother went through. But I let her know, I really need you. You're going to help me find who did this to Missy, because she knew her daughter better than probably anybody.
Missy's mother tells detectives what she knows of Missy's activities on the last night of her life.
Well, Missy worked these late hours as a food server. She would always let her mother know that I'm home, I'm safe. On the night of Missy's murder, she'd call her mother late at night when she got home.
She finished her phone call with her mom and then dispatch getting a phone call that the apartment's on fire, establishing kind of a window as to when the actual murder would have occurred.
Police determined that Missy had been killed sometime between midnight and 3:30 a.m. It's not much for detectives to go on, but when they arrive back in Arlington, they have an unexpected lead waiting.
Once the victim's name had been released, one of our officers came forward and said, I took a report listing your victim.
A week prior to the death, Missy Gruball filed a police report on a guy that's staying with Missy who stole from her, and I'm thinking that very well could be our killer. We need to find this person. We need to talk to him. We need to get him in here as soon as possible.
Coming up, detectives track a dangerous suspect
This individual made threats against her.
and soon uncover a lead they never expected.
It caught my attention immediately. Something is very suspicious here.
that puts them face to face with Missy's attacker.
I said, "You killed Missy Grubaugh. Let's start talking about this."
Arlington police detectives are searching for the killer of Texas college student Missy Grubaugh. They've learned that the 19-year-old co-ed filed a police report a week before her death.
Missy had reported a coworker took her tip jars, over $1,000 worth of tips.
Missy took the semester off in order to save more money, so all of her tip money was being hoarded so she could go back next semester to college.
The police report describes how Missy named a Charles Johnson as the potential thief, and that he had been staying with her before her money disappeared. Detectives speak to Missy's friends to find out more about Charles and his relationship to Missy.
Charles was a coworker and apparently was someone that she thought was a friend of hers.
She socialized with coworkers, typically after work.
Young people she worked with, that's her crowd. Charles Johnson at that time, we are told, was homeless. And so Missy, being the very generous individual that she is, allows him to come stay with her. In fact, she even gave him a key to her apartment.
Missy was very kind-hearted, and I think that it was very easy for some people to take advantage of kind-hearted people.
Talking with her friends, there was a common theme about Missy. She was not only incredibly sweet, but incredibly naive, too pure to see the bad in people. As an investigator, and that scares me because I see someone who is easily victimized.
Only days after Charles moved in, Missy discovers she has been played.
Missy finds out one day that about $1,000 is gone from her tip jar. Well, the only person that could have done that was Charles Johnson.
Enraged, Missy confronts Charles about the theft and kicks him out of her home.
Something else that was very important from everything that I learned about Missy was she will also stand up for what's right. So Missy immediately calls the police.
Missy filed a police report and a theft charge warrant was issued for Charles's arrest.
Here's some motive right here. This is retaliation for getting me in trouble. And so he's immediately on our radar. We want to see this guy. We want to talk to him. Problem is we didn't know where he was at. It's hard to find somebody who was basically homeless, and we had detectives that were assigned to find him.
While police search for Johnson, Missy's autopsy report comes in. It confirms investigators' belief that the fire is not what killed her.
The autopsy findings demonstrated she was dead before the fire started. She should have inhaled some smoke. We should have seen some soot. We should have seen some carbon monoxide in her blood. That's not the case here at all. She had a bruise of her left eye and an injury on the brow ridge that would be consistent with being struck by a fist or another object. Injuries directed that show that the assailant wanted to feel in control and dominant. A fatal stab wound to the chest was the actual cause of death. But it went completely through her heart and damaged her left lung, and there was a massive internal bleeding.
The autopsy also confirms detectives' worst suspicions. The attack was sexual in nature.
She had been forcibly penetrated. This was a rape homicide by a very aggressive perpetrator.
Though the fire destroyed physical evidence at the scene, the medical examiner immediately notifies detectives of a major discovery.
We did a search of the body for any remnant evidence that wasn't destroyed by the fire. Semen was recovered that could be analyzed for DNA.
Forensic evidence and physical evidence is great. You've got to have it. It leads you to your killer. So that semen was a forensic link to the suspect.
The semen is sent for DNA analysis, hoping it will point to the killer. But detectives make a calculated decision not to make the information public.
The fact that she was sexually assaulted was not public. It was not released. And the reason for that is because it's what we call guilt knowledge evidence. And it's knowledge that is only known by the person who did the crime. You never reveal that because that can lead you to that suspect and to identify him. That's very powerful evidence.
Other evidence is piling up too. Among the documents collected from Missy's apartment, detectives discover a treasure trove of personal letters.
These were letters from someone named Ivan Villa. The nature of the letters indicated some type of relationship between this individual and Missy Grubaugh. We don't know if it was romantic or not, but some type of close personal relationship. So that's important. We needed to find out who this individual was.
Detectives do a background check on Ivan, and they're alarmed by what they uncover.
Ivan was a registered sex offender. And that just set the hairs on the back of my neck up.
Yeah, this is the sort of individual that we're looking for. Let's go find Ivan right away.
Detectives investigating the rape and murder of Missy Grubaugh have found letters in the victim's apartment that reveal she was having a relationship with Ivan Villa, a young man with a dark past.
He was, in fact, flagged as a sex offender. And so he's immediately on our radar because we know that Missy was sexually assaulted.
Detectives examine the letters between Missy and Ivan and discover that they had a tumultuous relationship.
The context of those letters looked like a conflict of two young adults trying to make something work in a relationship that is filled with confusion.
The conflict centered around how far Missy would allow the relationship to go physically.
Missy was very moral. It was an admirable thing in our faith to remain pure until we were married. It's something that Missy took very seriously.
The letters suggest that Ivan and Missy may have come too close to crossing the line.
Apparently, there might have been times where they went a little further than Missy was comfortable with. You could tell that she was upset about that.
Missy's friends knew that she was not one to back down under pressure.
If she felt like she was being taken advantage of, then she would stand up for herself, and I admired that about her so much.
Bottom line is, we need to bring Ivan in. We need to talk to him because he was, in fact, in some level of a relationship with Missy at the time of her death.
2 days after Missy's murder, detectives bring Ivan in for an interview. He claims that he and Missy were working through their issues in a kind and loving way.
Ivan told me that he cared for Missy, and he wanted a relationship with her. He certainly did want to have that relationship go a step further, but Missy was convicted to her beliefs and to her faith. They were also battling with the fact that he had this crime over his head.
Ivan tells detectives he was home alone asleep the night Missy was murdered.
That's not an acceptable alibi for myself or Detective Stanton.
But was it really possible this young man could have committed such a horrible crime?
When you start talking about the personality of who you're looking for, you got to be careful. If you start picturing this person as this evil predator, you may miss the actual killer. That's why you have to follow the evidence. The fact that we had semen from the crime scene means we have forensic evidence that would either connect him or exclude him.
Detectives ask Ivan to provide DNA samples. But until those test results are revealed, detectives do not have grounds to hold Ivan in custody.
In 1994, those tests usually took anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
While waiting for results on DNA tests for Ivan, and searching for Missy's former coworker, Charles Johnson. Detectives continue their investigation by canvassing Missy's friends at the restaurant and learn something that adds another suspect to the list. Although this time, this suspect could be at the very top.
The name Jeffrey Smith came up. Her work associates told us that Jeffrey Smith was an employee there who Missy reported and got him in trouble at work. What we were being told is that really upset him and angered him.
Restaurant staff tell the detectives that Jeffrey had threatened to kill Missy during an outburst, and he was fired a few weeks later after getting into a fight with a manager.
What we are being told is this individual was hot-tempered, and he had made threats against her. So we're putting all of this together and thinking, yeah, we really need to talk to this guy.
But who could imagine a coworker committing such a horrendous crime? Detectives speak with another employee at the restaurant who knows Jeffrey well.
His girlfriend, Kristen, agreed to come in to speak with Detective Stan and I.
Visibly nervous, Kristen paints a troubling picture of her boyfriend.
Kristen told us that they were living together, but she also shared that she was concerned with his personality. He was very volatile. She was afraid of him, and she did not feel safe being there with him. She was going to move out and move back with her parents in Denton.
But it wasn't just fear for what Jeffrey might do that was causing Kristen to leave him. It was a fear of what he'd already done.
What Kristen wanted us to know, and she was very open about it, was she actually suspected that Jeff was involved in the murder of Missy.
Detectives investigating the murder of 19-year-old Missy Gruba are interviewing Kristen Waller, a young woman who believes her boyfriend, Jeffrey Smith, could be the killer.
She just basically said, this is what my belief is. So I asked why. How did she formulate that? Kristen told us the night of Missy's murder, Jeff did not come to the apartment, and he didn't come back all night. So she didn't know where he was at. She also knew the conflict between her and him. So she's putting all this together, and she actually believed that Jeff was with Missy on that night and that he committed this crime.
Kristen gives detectives the phone number for where Jeff is staying. A background check shows the 22-year-old has no criminal history, but detectives are still suspicious.
We know that he had made some threats against Missy, and his whereabouts are unknown on the night of her death, so we needed to talk to him. I called Jeff Smith after speaking with Kristen, and he actually was cooperative and agreed to come to the police department.
In the interview room, detectives are struck by Jeff's demeanor.
Jeff Smith was smiling and nonchalant, just really not taking the entire situation that serious. I asked him, what was your relationship like with Missy Gruba? His story was she was infatuated with him. And as a matter of fact, her infatuation is what created the problems and the conflict between him and Kristen. Kristen's telling us, no, I'm moving out because the guy scares me to death.
Jeff also has a conflicting account of his alibi.
He gave us this excuse that he was with Kristen. We already had information that he was not.
When detectives suggest Jeff is lying to them about his alibi, he laughs them off.
I've seen this type of personality before. He's narcissistic, he's cocky, he's arrogant. And I certainly wasn't going to take anything that he said at face value.
Despite their concerns about Jeff, detectives have no evidence to connect him to Missy's murder and are forced to let him go. But before he leaves, they ask him for a DNA sample. And to their surprise, he agrees.
He did give us the samples that we needed for a forensic analysis that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
Then, 4 days after Missy's murder, Detective Lenore gets a frantic call from Kristen about Jeffrey Smith.
He had abducted Kristen earlier in the morning, physically abducted her and drove off with her from her parents' home in Denton.
Kristen tells Detective Lenore that Jeff was distraught and held her in an apartment for 8 hours, threatening to kill her if she tried to leave.
Kristen's telling us the motive was that Jeff just didn't want her to leave him. He released her safely a little later that day, but now she didn't know where he was at. She was definitely afraid of him. She contacted the Denton Police Department and ended up getting a warrant for his arrest for kidnapping. He became a fugitive. You've got this guy who is a loose cannon, and there was a level of urgency to find him. We put out a national broadcast along with that warrant that he is also a suspect in a murder investigation.
With Kristen safely at her parents' house and police in several states searching for Jeff, detectives in Arlington find their murder investigation in a holding pattern.
As far as Jeff Smith, we do have his hair, his blood, and his saliva for DNA that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
DNA testing is still underway, but days later, investigators do get an important update from the lab.
They were able to type the blood from the semen, and they knew they were looking for someone with a certain type of blood.
Jeff did not match the blood type from the semen.
In addition to Jeffrey Smith, Ivan Villa is also ruled out because of his blood type, leaving Charles Johnson as the only active suspect for Missy's murder. And Charles is still at large.
That is incredibly frustrating because there is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have it.
As the weeks pass with the case unsolved, Missy's family and friends grow more and more concerned.
It was very disheartening for a lot of us. We just watched the news and would hang on to anything that they would mention about it. It made all of us wonder why it happened to Missy. It was just devastating.
Then, a month into the investigation, detectives get a tip from an unexpected source.
I got a call out of the blue from Miss Grubau. She wanted to let me know that she recalled a conversation that she had with Missy. It was so incredibly bizarre. And I just thought something is very suspicious here.
Detectives hunting the killer of college student Missy Grubau have just received a lead that has turned up the heat on a case going cold. The victim's mother recalls a detail from the days just before Missy's death.
Missy's mom is providing information about how Missy had talked about this guy, Luis.
He was a 32-year-old man who had come over to the apartment, and the main thing that Mrs. Grubau remembers is that he talked to her all night long till in the early morning hours, but then they got involved in a pillow fight.
At the time, Mrs. Grubau thought little of the playful incident, but she suggests maybe Luis could help the investigation with information about Missy. Detectives have a different view.
This is bizarre. This is strange. The 32-year-old man had a pillow fight with her. It caught my attention immediately.
Investigators ask how Missy knew Luis.
Luis worked with Missy, and he lived at the Holly Park Apartments. She had done some babysitting for Luis's baby at the apartment complex.
Detectives' first stop? The restaurant where Missy and Luis both worked. Luis isn't there, but the manager tells them Luis is a model employee.
He was an Army veteran. I learned that about him. No criminal history. Matter of fact, management gave him an award for a heroic act. He actually stopped a robbery.
The detectives ask workers what they knew about Luis's relationship with Missy.
Co-workers described Lewis as a friend. Sometimes after work, they might enjoy a beer together.
Detectives also hear something that catches them off guard.
A work associate relayed to us that Lewis made the comment, and these were his words, is, "I hope they catch that son of a bitch that killed and raped Missy." The fact that she was sexually assaulted, no one should have known that. That was never released. He might have just been speculating, but the fact that it was said really, really alarmed me.
Investigators have uncovered yet another suspicious coworker in Missy's life, one that she saw every day. Detectives asked the manager for Luis's phone number.
Told him I was investigating the death of Missy Grubal and that his name had surfaced from her babysitting his son, and Luis agreed to come see me. He was relaxed, he was polite, pleasant, regular, clean-cut guy. He told us that Missy used to babysit his son and that they worked together. So I told Luis what I want to do is exclude all of the known males to Missy so that I could find the guilty party. And the process in which I do that is I take samples, blood, hair, and saliva, compare it to the DNA and exclude them.
The request instantly changes Luis's mood.
His response immediately was, what are you talking about? Wasn't the evidence all burnt up? And I said, no, it wasn't. I've got significant incriminating evidence that was specifically left there by the suspect. Now his demeanor is changing, and you can see the concern in his face. I kind of even broke my own rule a little bit here, because a lot of times I don't like to give guilt knowledge information, but the fact that I knew that he had already said something about Missy being sexually assaulted, I went ahead and revealed to him whoever killed Missy sexually assaulted her, and I've got their semen. And Luis immediately says, I've got to go. I have to leave. And I have no legal right to keep him, regardless of what I believe. I just simply asked, Luis, are you going to give me your sample? He says, I got to get out of here. I got to leave. We'll do it Monday.
Monday comes and goes with no sign of Luis, but detectives don't let up.
I call him. He calls me back Tuesday. We make arrangements for Wednesday. Come Wednesday, he doesn't show up again.
Detective Lenore calls Luis at work, but gets some alarming news.
Management had informed us that the woman that he was living with at the time, his common-law wife, had called and said that he had to leave town. I called her. I said, I hear Luis is gone. You and I need to talk.
Jeanette has been living with Luis for 2 years. The couple moved into the Holly Park apartments 6 months earlier.
They had been together long enough for them to have a child together. She was also pregnant with another child. But what was interesting is on the Monday that Luis was going to meet with me, which was about 3 days earlier, they got married. They got legally married. Well, in Texas, a wife cannot testify against her husband. I mean, those are my thoughts that are going on. I kind of kept that to myself and said, okay, that's interesting.
Jeanette knew Missy as a sweet girl who used to babysit her son and had been shocked to hear about her murder.
And so I asked if she recalls what occurred on the night of Missy's murder. She said Luis had gotten off work about 10:30 or 11 and informed her that he was going to have some drinks with some friends. Then he came in close to midnight, and then she heard him leave.
2 hours later, Jeanette hears Luis return.
She hears him come into the apartment and takes a shower and then leaves again. And then she hears him come back again. She notices that he's coughing and he smells of smoke. His story to her is that he was out jogging and he noticed that there was an apartment on fire. And so he went in there and that he saw this individual on a bed and he said it was Missy and he tried to do mouth to mouth. He said, but he couldn't do it, and he was overcome by smoke, and that he had to leave, and he came back. That's it, end of story. They just go to bed. Nobody calls 911. Nobody does anything. They go to sleep. I mean, the story is so bizarre, but she didn't question him. And I don't think she ever really saw it for what it was until she actually sits down and starts telling me. And as she's telling me, reality is setting in as far as what Luis might have done. She's pretty much stunned. I said, I need to go into your apartment. I need to get a search warrant.
Investigators descend on Luis and Jeanette's apartment, just a few buildings over from where Missy was killed.
One of the things that I wanted was his dog tags. Because he was in the Army, I wanted to know what his blood type was. And I wanted to know if the blood type from his dog tags matched the blood type from the semen.
The blood type matches that of Missy's attacker. It's the link detectives have been looking for, and enough to bring Luis in. But first, they'll need to find him.
So I got an arrest warrant for Luis. The next day, I get a teletype that the vehicle that Luis was in was found abandoned.
Detectives believe they have finally uncovered the man who murdered Missy Grubaugh and set fire to her apartment. But Luis Arroyo has fled Arlington. His car found abandoned and set ablaze in San Antonio.
We don't know, but suspected there was evidence there, but the car was pretty much gone. I mean, it was burned up.
There's an urgency. We need to find this person as soon as possible.
Detective Lenore suspects Luis's wife Jeanette knows where he's hiding.
I told her that we realized you had nothing to do with this crime, but you can be a party by covering and by lying. So I said, you realize that when she was murdered, she was sexually assaulted. And when she heard that, you could see it upset her. It angered her.
Confronted with the full horror of what was done to Missy, Jeanette gives up Luis.
Jeanette gave me the address where he was staying in San Antonio. San Antonio Police Department went into the home and arrested Luis without incident.
Detectives Lenore and Stanton traveled to San Antonio to confront Luis Arroyo in person.
It is the most unique interrogation I've ever seen. I mean, Luis really had like a mental regression, and he actually wound up in a ball on the floor, weeping and kind of in a fetal position.
I don't know what he was doing. I just thought he wanted us to have some type of empathy for him.
When Luis finally tells his side of the story, it doesn't add up for detectives.
He did not admit to sexually assaulting Missy Grubaugh. He did admit, yes, I did have sexual intercourse with her. He said, we had consensual sex. I knew it was her first time, and I wanted it to be a very gentle and pleasant experience for her. That just sickened me. What happened to that young lady was anything but gentle and loving. It was brutal.
Faced with Luis's denial, Detective Lenore changes tactics.
I said, you killed Missy Grubaugh. All right, let's start talking about this. And he said, you know, I don't remember. I remember getting a knife. I think I did stab her.
Detectives are stunned. Is this the confession they've been waiting for?
I'm not going to call it a confession, because my definition of a confession is someone who says, this is what I did and I did everything, that you have evidence that they committed. Luis gave a statement with several admissions that included guilt knowledge information. Luis did not admit to setting the fire, but he recalls that there was a fire set. He gave us all of this incriminating information that clearly said it was him.
They have enough to charge Luis. But detectives want to make the case against him airtight.
Detective Stan and I got an evidentiary search warrant and collected his blood, his hair, and saliva sample. He was, in fact, matched to the DNA from the sexual assault kit.
With Luis's statements, detectives can put together exactly what happened on the night Missy was murdered.
I believe he went there thinking he could convince her to have intercourse with him. His primary focus was to have sex with that young lady. Maybe initially he thought would be consensual, which it would never happen. So now he's mad at her, and then he took it to another level, physically abused her, sexually assaulted her, and then he killed her. After he killed Missy, he needed to destroy evidence, and that's when he made his decision to set fire to the apartment.
Lewis was charged with capital murder. Once we had the written statement, we had the statements from the wife. Pretty straightforward case.
As Luis awaits trial, detectives zero in on two former suspects in the case.
Charles Johnson was finally tracked down, and he was not even in the area at the time of the murder.
Jeffrey Smith was arrested and convicted of kidnapping his girlfriend, Kristen. He received a 4-year sentence. Luis Arroyo's trial lasts only 5 days.
We got a conviction rather quickly. And in Texas, once a person is convicted of capital murder with the death penalty waived, it's an automatic life sentence.
Although detectives have found their killer, the win is bittersweet.
He being in prison will never take away the pain, the horrific torture that child was put through. And him being in prison will never heal the wounds that the family has. They never recover. You can't bring Missy back. You just do what you got to do and make sure people pay for the crimes they commit.
Missy's mother is in a state of permanent grief.
Please welcome Rodney Alcala.
I'll take one.
That's number 1.
It was one of the most famous dating shows ever.
Looking back, it is chilling to realize that this iconic show would unknowingly feature a remorseless killer.
The horror story begins.
I remember wanting to jump out of the car.
The so-called dating game killer is one of the country's most notorious criminals, but one most people have never heard of.
He had sociopathic personality traits. He had no shame.
He walks up and down the streets and asks people if he could take their picture.
What better place to be a sexual predator than to go to a feeding frenzy like New York?
She'd been strangled with nylon stockings.
It's the talk of the town.
Rodney Alcala has murdered at least 5 women. The FBI put Rodney Alcala on the 10 most wanted list.
Oh my God, will Alcala get away with it?
The body count is piling up. He goes on the hunt for more victims, and there's absolutely nothing to stop him.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sometimes I think Chris was probably hitchhiking, probably looking to get away somewhere, and he just probably stopped for her.
She's by herself. She could have met him at a gas station while he's filling up. Can you give me a lift? But somewhere along the lines, I think he was giving her a ride someplace. I don't think she had any indication what was about to happen to her.
Chris was very trusting, so, you know, that was her downfall. My sister Christine was born Christine Ruth Thornton, but we always called her Chris. She was 11 years older than me. Chris was tall. She was 5'10", dark hair, dark eyes, just, you know, a beautiful person inside and out. In the summer of '77, Chris was just 27 years old. Chris was in San Antonio. She was pregnant at the time.
Christine was a free spirit. She kind of went where the wind blew her.
She met up with her boyfriend and, you know, had this crazy idea of going to Montana to pan for gold.
And my understanding is that they were in southwest Wyoming and had an argument ensued between the two of them, and he left her pregnant and alone, and I believe that's the last time anybody had ever seen her.
In the summer of '78, I decided to go down to San Antonio and do some investigating of my own. I actually tried to find her boyfriend, but did not have a good address for him. The San Antonio police refused to take a missing persons report on Chris because she was an adult.
I believe throughout all the years that Christine was missing, I think Kathy was always looking for a way to open up that door of where she is. In '82, this herder out in the middle of nowhere comes across a pile of bones, obviously human remains.
What they found was it was a body of a 25 to 35-year-old female. Along with her bones were also bones of an infant.
There wasn't any identification, and so we remained cold for many years.
And investigators never imagined that those bones would lead them to a notorious serial killer, a man I would later be called upon to prosecute. And this photograph, discovered by police, would lead a heartbroken family to their loved one, missing for almost 40 years. Her smile shared by a tragic list of young women and girls who trusted a charming stranger, only to discover a dark secret that began back in the fall of 1968.
So '68 was tumultuous. It was sort of flower power, free living. It was quite a era and quite a year.
Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy have been assassinated. Andy Warhol was shot that year. And there have been urban uprisings throughout the 60s.
Being a police officer in Los Angeles or anywhere in the country for that matter at that time, everything was anti-war, anti-establishment.
And it's commented on by some of the leading vocalists of the day. You had Barry McGuire in 1965 doing Eve of Destruction.
The Eastern world, it is exploding.
You had Bob Dylan, of course, doing Hard Rain's Gonna Fall.
The hard rain's gonna fall.
So what we're seeing is the influence of the new freedoms represented by the counterculture be appropriated by mainstream culture. And that includes daytime television. That even includes game shows like The Dating Game.
The Dating Game began with Chuck Barris back in, I believe it was 1965. He had dealings with ABC, and he just came up with the idea, and he pitched it to a couple of people. It caught on right away.
The premise was the female asking questions of three bachelors who sat on the other side of a partition. She wasn't able to see them, of course, and she picked one for a date, and then she met the guy that she had picked, and they were awarded a date.
Looking back, it is chilling to realize that this iconic show, celebrating love and romance, would unknowingly feature a remorseless killer.
And from the mid-'60s onward, Southern California is a mecca for anyone looking to reinvent him or herself and have a fantastic time. They're all partying at some of the hotels on the Strip, like the Chateau Marmont.
Tally Shapiro was an 8-year-old little girl who lived at Chateau Marmont, which is a famous hotel in California.
Her father was a music industry executive. She had a mother and a sister and a brother, and they were living there because their house had gone on fire, and they were staying there temporarily. And a car pulls up alongside of her.
And it's this man who says, oh, it's okay, I'm not a stranger. I know your parents. I'm friends with your parents.
And she thought, well, maybe I'll get in the car.
Well, fortunately, a good citizen looks at this and says, I don't like the looks of this.
Holly Shapiro was 8 years old, and it was a beautiful sunny day in September.
And this adorable little girl would skip to school each morning, carefree, loving, wearing her little white Mary Janes. And then the horror story of Tally begins.
I remember the morning was nice and warm because I wore the dress that my nanny had crocheted for me.
And a car pulls up alongside of her, and the man leans out and says, I have a beautiful picture I'd like to show you.
And I guess asked if I needed a ride to school. And I told him I didn't talk to strangers.
And he pulled up alongside of her a little further, kept trolling her.
And that's when he told me he knew my parents. And I really didn't want to get in the car, but I was raised to respect my elders. I got in the car, that's when he asked what time my school started, and then that's when he realized we had plenty of time and he was going to swing by and show me a poster. You know, I didn't know to fear people.
Well, fortunately, a good citizen looks at this and says, I don't like the looks of this. And he actually follows him to his apartment.
The moment I felt danger was when he wanted to go by his place. And I remember wanting to jump out of the car.
So the Good Samaritan, he actually followed the car to a residence where the man took the little girl out of the car and walked her inside, and that didn't look right.
And he calls the police. He says, you know, this is real hinky looking. I don't like it. There's this little girl. You know, I think you ought to check it out.
I don't remember going up to the apartment, and I don't remember anything after that. I was driving down Sunset heading toward West Hollywood when I received a call to go see a man about a possible kidnapping. I followed him over to the location. At that time, I thought, okay, I better call in for a backup. So I went and called in and requested a backup unit. I went to the front door and started knocking. I could hear someone running around.
So the man came and he opened up the curtains a little bit and peered out and said, oh, sorry, I was in the shower. I'll be right there.
I see this male person on the other side, no clothes, not dripping with water, no towel. And I said, oh, okay, you need to open the door right now. I need to come in. And he said, wait, let me put my pants on. And I said, okay, you got 3 seconds. I probably waited 5 seconds and I kicked the door in. To the right was a dining room, to the left was a living room, and straight ahead was a kitchen. And here was this little girl, blood all over the place, clothes, shoes, and a dress thrown to one side. There was coins on the floor, and she had this steel bar across her neck, which probably weighed 2 pounds.
And there's an image that I will never forget. It's an image of this pipe used to strangle her with, essentially. Press it against her throat, and more blood than should ever be able to come out of a little 8-year-old girl next to these Mary Jane shoes on the floor of this kitchen.
I looked at her, I thought she was dead, she wasn't breathing. The other officers came around, we were looking for the suspect. I went back to check on Telly, and I just couldn't leave her there like that.
The officer had a sort of a life or death decision to make. Chase this man out the back and catch him, or render life-saving aid to the little girl and save her life. And he chose the little girl.
And as I went back in the kitchen, she started gagging, Telly. So then that put everything into high gear. But when I was yelling, the officer that was covering the back door thought I was asking for help. So he ran to the front to help me. We later found out the suspect escaped through the back door.
Telly was bleeding out, literally clinging to life. Fortunately, there was already an ambulance racing to the scene.
Tally arrived in the emergency room, and the doctor said there was no chance of saving her. And after she had been taken by the ambulance, they started looking around the apartment to see if there were any clues as to who the person was.
I found his ID. We determined he was a student at UCLA in the photography department.
And the name of the man who attended UCLA was Rodney Alcala.
They searched that house, and there are references in reports of hundreds and hundreds of photographs of young women and boys in various stages of dress, in various stages of vulnerability that were in Rodney Alcala's possession.
We had to find this Rodney Alcala. We had to get him off the street, because if he would do that to a little 8-year-old girl, there's no telling what he would do.
You know, it was just by, sheer luck that Tally didn't die. She should have died, but she didn't.
She was in a coma for 32 days. Nobody thought that she would survive, and miraculously, she pulled through.
She was able to get back on her feet after several months in the hospital.
My parents mentioned nothing. It was never brought up. It was never spoken about. I remember walking into my classroom and everyone looking at me like I was supposed to be dead.
And her parents had just had enough. They could not stay in California another minute.
They moved out of the country shortly after that. They moved to Mexico. The father wanted to give her a better, safer environment to live in.
And that's where they stayed for the next many years.
Rodney Alcala has gotten away, and now he's fled, and nobody knows where he's gone.
I was a police officer with LAPD. This was one of my very first cases, actually, and it was 4 or 5 months old at that time, and he was in the wind. I went out and interviewed a number of his professors at UCLA. One of the things they told me is, you got the wrong guy. Rod Alcala is a super guy. He wouldn't hurt a flea. Really nice guy.
Police wanted to know, who is Rodney Alcala, and why would this well-liked 25-year-old college student so viciously attack an 8-year-old little girl?
This is San Antonio, Texas, home of the Alamo.
Rodney Alcala was born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bucor on August 23rd, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas. He had an older brother, Raul. He had an older sister, and then he had a younger sister.
His family lived in Mexico for a while.
The grandma passed away, and the father left the family.
They ended up moving to Los Angeles area to Monterey Park. He had everything he wanted, Alcala. He went to Catholic schools. He went to, private schools.
Everyone who knew him said he was a kind boy, a respectful boy, and highly intelligent.
Rodney Alcala had every advantage that somebody could have in life. He had a mother who loved him, which is a big deal psychologically. He had friends. He had brothers and sisters who all turned out to be very successful.
His older brother was already at West Point, so this is a pretty, patriotic family.
And then he joined the Army in the early 60s, and that's where the trouble really began for Rodney Alcala.
So Alcala didn't fare well in the Army. He went AWOL a few times, got in some trouble.
As it turns out, this bright, handsome young man with a promising future had nightmarish urges that he refused to ignore.
So 1963, gets a pass from the military. He ultimately goes to New York. While in New York, he assaults a girl. He hits her over the head with a Coke bottle. That girl was able to run away.
He had sociopathic personality traits. He had no shame, and he didn't, feel guilty about anything that he did.
The military felt that he had had a nervous breakdown. That was their analysis of it. The psychiatrists at the hospital felt it was a lot more serious than that. But he was discharged honorably and not a blemish on his record.
So he ends up coming back to California, where he enrolls in the UCLA Fine Arts program as a photography major.
So Rodney Alcala is actually attending UCLA and living less than a mile away from Chateau Marmont when he attacks Tali Shapiro in 1968 and then seems to vanish.
I was pretty much convinced he'd gone to Mexico because he had relatives in Mexico.
So it's been 3 years now since the rape of Tali Shapiro. The FBI eventually became interested in the case and put Rodney Alcala on the 10 most wanted list.
So I get a phone call and it's the FBI in New Hampshire. Say, hey, we've got your guy in custody, Rodney James Alcala.
It seemed like an open and shut case, but it was just the beginning of what would become a pattern of catch and release that would continue for more than a decade. While the FBI is on the hunt for Rodney Alcala, he's actually living on the East Coast under an assumed name, John Berger.
So in 1968, John Berger walks into NYU and applies to their School of the Arts. So there he was in New York, a fugitive, now for 3 years.
What better place to be a sexual predator than go to a feeding frenzy like New York?
So New York in the early 70s is certainly, from the civic standpoint, rather challenged. It's Mayor Lindsay's second term. He's having a hard time delivering services to people. Snow removal, garbage. Police feel like they're under siege. Crime is certainly up, violent crime.
And it's during this crime wave in New York City that Alcala is able to fly under the radar, and he strikes again.
Cornelia Crilly grew up in Queens. She had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, Catholic family, very well respected in the neighborhood, had a very happy childhood.
She was beautiful. She had long, beautiful Irish hair and Irish eyes, big smile, very friendly and funny.
A few years after high school, Cornelia met Dream Man, Leon Borstein, and they began dating.
I was 29 or 30. She was probably 23 at the time.
She wanted to become a TWA stewardess. At that time, they were known as ambassadors to the world and had a lot of prestige. And once she was accepted, she got an apartment with a couple of her stewardess friends on East 83rd Street.
In fact, in the east side of Manhattan, an area becomes known as the Girl Belt because for the first time, young women are living on their own and experiencing their careers as they never had in the past.
I had gotten a job in a Brooklyn DA's office. So in the middle of the day, I got a call from her mother saying she couldn't find her. I said, okay, when I leave, I'll go find her. I'm sure she's at the apartment.
Mrs. Crilly was trying to get in touch with her daughter, and she didn't answer the phone.
She was living in a building where I could go into the building without a key. I knocked on the door, and there was no response. That's when I called the cops. And they came over. I was at the front door when they broke into the back window. They opened the door. They told me that she had been killed.
She was down on the floor of her New York apartment. She had been strangled with nylon stockings and also had bite marks on her breast. She'd been raped and brutally murdered.
We got a call from the police department that somebody still had to identify the body. So I went over to the morgue.
The Crilly case is very unique because she had just moved in the apartment. She's a new girl. No one knew her. So that was a drawback for the detectives in the beginning.
New York PD has this brutal crime scene and no suspects.
We had almost 2,000 murders that year. It wasn't peace, love, and joy. Detectives had a lot of dead ends with this case. They had nothing, unfortunately, and the case went cold.
Well, still enrolled as a student at NYU, Rodney Alcala, a.k.a. John Berger, actually spent his summers as a counselor at an arts camp in New Hampshire.
So in August of 1971, Two campers take the little dirt road down to the post office, and all of a sudden it starts pouring. They run inside the post office to get cover, and they start looking around to see what is in the post office.
And there's the good old FBI 10 Most Wanted list.
They go from one to the next to the next. Each one looks more horrible than the preceding one.
They look at this and they're like, hey, that's Mr. Berger.
So they go back to the camp and they tell the head counselor, we saw this 10 Most Wanted poster of somebody who looks like our John Berger. So he said, don't say anything to anyone and I'll go down to the post office and take a look. So he comes back, he calls the FBI, and he says, I think we have your man.
I get a phone call and it's the FBI in New Hampshire. Say, hey, we've got your guy in custody, Rodney James Alcala. I said, you've got him in custody. Fantastic.
This has been 3 years that Alcala has been on the lam and that Hodel has been looking for him.
So on the 12th of August, 1971, I, with a partner, picked him up, took him to the airport, flew him back. We got our guy. You know, he's going to prison for at least 20, 30 years. Parents didn't want Tally to testify. They said it would be too traumatic.
So I think the big fear was, oh my God, you know, will Alcala get away with it?
And what's dangerous in the case of a sociopath is they're very persuasive.
In 1971, Rodney Alcala is arrested in New Hampshire and brought back to LA to finally face charges for the rape and attempted murder of Tally Shapiro.
He was very low-key, kind of came off a bit introverted, but I could see his mind functioning. And that's what made this guy so dangerous. He was able to read people very well and stay a step or two or three ahead of them. For him, it was all a kind of a chess game.
Rodney Alcala is charged with all the crimes against Tally Shapiro, which included kidnapping, rape, child molestation, and torture.
It turns out that because Tally and her family were in Mexico, the only charge they could put on him was a plea deal for child molestation. No brutality, no bashing, no raping, no almost killing.
And they wound up giving Rodney Alcala a plea deal, where he pled to what's known as an indeterminate sentence. He had 1 year to life in California State Prison.
With an indeterminate sentence, it's sliding, it's not determined. And then the parole board has more flexibility in determining whether someone's been rehabilitated or whether they're a danger to the community. This meant that Rodney Alcala would have yearly parole reviews. And what's dangerous in the case of a sociopath is they're very persuasive.
And he's getting therapy in prison, and they believe that he has shown enough progress that in 34 months, the California Parole Board released Rodney Alcala back into the world.
Not even 3 years. Good behavior, they said. Model prisoner, they said. And he was out on the streets again.
The heartbreaking part about this is that they could have kept him, but in those days, that was an era where they believed so strongly in the power of therapy. But when it comes to fixing psychopaths, it doesn't work.
So Alcala is the luckiest man in the world. He's out on parole, and he's having the best time. He's photographing people, and he one day decides to take a ride, and he starts trolling again.
True to form, 2 months later, Rodney Alcala is caught smoking marijuana on the cliffs of Sunset Beach in Huntington Beach with a 13-year-old girl. And he was caught by park rangers.
So he gets arrested yet again. And this time, he gets 2.5 years, and he's taken to prison.
In June 1977, Rodney Alcala is released again from California State Prison, and he goes in, different parole officer this time, and he asks for permission to go on some vacations.
And the parole officer miraculously says, sure, go ahead. So Rodney heads off to New York. July 1977 in New York was a difficult time for everyone. It was hot, it was steamy, the garbage wasn't being collected.
And you used to read the newspaper, Daily News or the Post, first 20 pages of just violence, 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 every day.
There were a lot of murders going on, including Son of Sam.
During the time of Son of Sam in 1977, the city was afraid. Look, you had a lunatic running around shooting men and women in cars.
Police in New York are on special alert tonight for a psychopathic killer who calls himself Son of Sam.
His favorite targets, young white women with long dark hair.
During that time, Alcala is taking a lot of photographs. He walks up and down the streets and asks people if he can take their picture. Young boys, young girls, older women, doesn't matter. He just wants to take photographs. And a young woman says, sure, you can take my photograph. And they start talking and they get along. It's very nice. Her name is Ellen Hover.
Ellen was strikingly beautiful. She had long dark hair and long slender arms and legs and carried herself like a dancer.
Her father was the owner of Ciro's in Hollywood, a well-known nightclub where Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin and other people appeared.
Ellen was very trusting of other people. She came from a Hollywood family, grew up in Beverly Hills, and then Great Neck, and then Manhattan. Ellen loved people.
On July 13th and 14th was the famous New York City blackout.
This is an ABC News special report.
New York City went totally dark last night, and tonight large parts of the city still are without power.
It's lawlessness. People loot, crime goes through the roof. You know, people are afraid.
There's no refrigeration, no water, no lights on one of the hottest, steamiest nights of the year in New York City.
It was a very unsettling, hard time for most people.
On July 15th, Ellen Hover goes missing.
That evening, friends tried to get in touch with Ellen. Nobody could.
The phone rang. It was Ellen's mother, Yvonne Schwartz. Mrs. Schwartz asked me if I had heard from Ellen since the weekend, and I said no. The next thing I knew, I was watching the 11 o'clock news, and there was Ellen's picture. New York heiress missing.
And the next day, when the police showed up at her door, they looked inside and they found on her calendar there was an entry that said she was meeting John Berger.
New York City went totally dark last night, and tonight large parts of the city still are without power.
Ellen Hover's disappearance was a huge mystery. This was a very big deal, that this socialite, this young woman who was just gone, missing.
There was nothing in her background that suggested that she would have run away.
It's in the New York Times. It's on posters. It's on the news. It's the talk of the town.
When the police showed up at her door, they looked inside.
Nothing looks like an attack happened there, but they collect evidence and mail, notes, things like that. And one of the things they take is her calendar.
And there was an entry that said she was meeting John Berger.
They research back, and they try to ID who John Berger is.
You're talking about a woman who goes missing in New York City pre-computer. And so Rodney Alcala / John Berger was never really on the radar of the New York City Police Department.
So Alcala goes back to LA, and he's there actually trying to find a job.
Rodney Alcala gets a job with the Los Angeles Times working as a typesetter.
You have to put this into perspective. On the lam for 3 years, 10 most wanted, 2 stints in jail, felon. He applies under his own name, Rodney Alcala, and he gets the job.
He actually would bring in photographs to show some of the people at his work. A lot of the photos were of nude girls. And I think it was like the time when people didn't really question it. You weren't like, oh my God, you're a pedophile. Like instead they were like, oh, he's just kind of strange. You know, he's very artsy.
So 5 months after Alcala is returned to LA, the FBI is actually able to connect the dots between Rodney Alcala, the name John Berger, and the notes found in Ellen Hover's calendar. So Rodney Alcala was eventually questioned by the FBI in relation to the disappearance of Ellen Hover, and he admitted being with her.
Where did you meet Ellen on the 15th?
He said he had taken her up to Westchester to take a picture. They had a lovely time, and that was it. Never saw her again.
I vaguely recall like dropping her off. That was it.
At that point, they still had not found a body.
Other than him admitting to the crime, saying, I killed her, there wasn't enough to arrest him.
This is Bill McCreary in North Tarrytown with a story about the discovery of the body of a millionaire's daughter missing for the past 11 months.
Ultimately, she's found. It's almost a year later. She's found up in an area by the Rockefeller estate.
They found clothing of hers nearby. They went back to the same site and they discovered her remains.
But it's all skeletal. She's identified through dental comparison.
Well, police are able to positively identify the remains of Ellen Hover. There is no forensic evidence that leads them to her killer.
1970s was considered a serial killer central.
You have the Hillside Strangler, the Night Stalker, 2 freeway killers. You have the Bedroom Basher. Elsewhere, you have Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy killing people in Chicago.
Recently, there's been a rash of mass murders.
1977 through 1978, many women were murdered.
Police in this era are lacking a lot of the investigative tools they have today. There's no DNA. There's no surveillance camera around every corner. People aren't walking around with a GPS in their pocket.
All of these things lead to this sort of perfect storm for Rodney Alcala, where he's able to remain one step ahead of police, and he goes on the hunt for more victims, and there's absolutely nothing to stop him.
Jill Barcombe was a 19-year-old girl in New York who was adventuresome and wanted to take a trip with a friend of hers. And so she left New York for Los Angeles.
Jill and I were very close as children growing up. We were often mistaken as twins. Jill had a very free spirit about her.
Bruce was very sad when she left New York, was very scared for her, being so young at 19 years old.
So November 10th, 1977, I called home and there was crying in the background. They said, you need to come home. You need to come home. And that's all they would say.
Jill Barcombe was found off of Franklin Canyon Road, and it was down the street from Marlon Brando's home at the time. She was found bent over, half naked. Her head was facing the dirt.
She has multiple ligatures on her neck. It was a brutal crime scene.
I came into a house of siblings, distraught, righteously so, and heard it from my mother directly that my sister was dead.
Her face was unrecognizable. Her brother said at the funeral that he couldn't even recognize his sister. It was so mutilated.
I had night terrors the day that Jill's body arrived. It wasn't just murder, it wasn't just rape, it was brutal, it was sadistic. And nobody could understand why the things happened to her.
They thought perhaps this could be the work of the Hillside Strangler, because that's what the Hillside Strangler did. He strangled women and left them on the side of the road.
And it complicated this investigation because Jill Barcombe had a friend when she got out to LA that was actually abducted and murdered by the Hillside Strangler.
In the end, the police were unable to link the murder of Jill Barcombe to the Hillside Strangler, and the case just went cold. That meant the string of murders of young girls and women continued.
Georgia Wickstead was 27 years old. She was absolutely gorgeous. She was a nurse that worked for cardiac care.
She was from Los Angeles. She worked out of the Centinela Hospital and just recently moved to Malibu.
Every morning she would pick up another nurse and they would drive to the hospital together to do their shift. And one morning she didn't show up.
So the police were called to do a welfare check of her in her home. It was discovered that her window was open and the screen was removed. When the police entered her home, there was blood everywhere. Her body was completely naked and strewn on the floor, kind of posed open.
The viciousness and the sadism involved in her murder is so disturbing and so profound.
There was a handprint that was found on the brass bedding, but there was no one to match the palm print to. And again, that case went cold.
And the third person who was found dead in the same way as the other two was Charlotte Lamb.
Charlotte Lamb, in 1978, was a legal secretary living in the Santa Monica area. She had called some friends one night to go out and go dancing in Santa Monica. Her friends decided not to go. Her body was later found in El Segundo, miles away, in an apartment complex she had no connection to.
She had been strangled and she'd been brutally raped and murdered. Her arms had been folded behind her back, which made her back arch to expose her breasts. She'd been posed. It's just very disturbing and incredibly sad.
I met with Rodney 5 or 6 times. I administered assessments with regard to his sexual interests. Many times the rapist, killer, antisocial person will pose dead bodies, and they do want law enforcement and other people to see this. And there's a message in that. The message for Rodney is that I am here, you will remember me.
So instead of hiding in the shadows, Rodney Alcala is almost fearless, and he puts himself out there in perhaps the most public way possible.
Rodney going on the dating game is a great example of him being predatory, him being confident, narcissistic, and of course he wouldn't go on unless he would win.
And 5, 4, 3.
He always wins.
Faction number 1 is a successful photographer. He might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Please welcome Rodney Alcala.
Bachelor number 1.
Yes?
What's your best time?
Night times when it really gets good.
In retrospect, it has got to be one of the creepiest moments on TV.
He says, I always get my girl.
The so-called dating game killer is one of the country's most notorious criminals.
They told us that they had found Robin. It was devastating.
There's nothing that hurts like that. Nothing.
Her plan was to shoot Alcala. She wanted to avenge her daughter.
He was a sadistic killer who deserved death.
Model prisoner, they said, and he was out on the streets again.
A pattern of catch and release that would continue for more than a decade.
All these pictures that the police had from a serial killer. His victims are still out there.
So by 1978, the body count is piling up. Rodney Alcala has murdered at least 5 women on 2 coasts and almost murdered a little girl, and he's just about to make his primetime debut.
In the 70s, I was the executive producer and Ellen was the contestant coordinator. The show that Rodney Alcala appeared on aired in September 1978.
The dating game appearance is just a bizarre part about this case. I think that what it reflects is the narcissism and the ego and the arrogance of a serial killer. So he actually tries out for Chuck Berry Productions and becomes a bachelor for the dating game.
He was very striking. I don't know, there was a boldness about him, and he had long black hair. He was just a striking looking person.
In terms of putting him on as a contestant, I think on the form I wrote NW, which was my symbol for no way, no darn way, is this guy going to be on the show? Because I noticed that he had a very strange personality.
It's like, are you kidding? He's so attractive. Everyone's going to love him. All the women are going to love him.
And I said, all right, we'll put him on a show, but we've got to surround him with 2 guys that have personalities and that are respectable and decent and fun.
My name is Jed Mills. When I got the job on The dating game, they said you're going to be bachelor number 2, so you'll be sitting in the center. Bachelor number 1 is a little creepy. Notice that right away. In the green room, he jumps in. He says, I always get my girl.
Number 1, would you say hello to Cheryl, please? We're going to have a great time together, Cheryl.
Immediately did not like this guy.
And here we go.
Bachelor number 1.
Yes.
What's your best time?
One of our edicts was to make the show much sexier and much more provocative than the show in the 60s. Everything was sexy in the 70s. So we pushed the envelope.
The best time is at night. Nighttime's when it really gets good.
The sexual innuendo intrigued the audience. They loved it, and they started clapping. Yeah, they loved this guy.
Oddly enough, 42 years later, I still remember Cheryl Bradshaw. She did voices.
And she says, suppose I was auditioning you for a private class, and you're a dirty old man.
You're a dirty old man. Take it.
Come on, over here.
In retrospect, it has got to be one of the creepiest moments on TV.
The audience is beside themselves. They love this.
Cheryl Bradshaw asked about what kind of food he would be if she was going to serve him for dinner.
I'm called the banana, and I look really good.
Can you be a little more descriptive?
Peel me.
In retrospect, it sounds horrible, but at the time, we were looking for raunchy, sexy answers, and that was one. Taken in context now, oh my God.
Rodney's motives for going on the dating game are, in my opinion, part of his personality disorder. He wants a lot of attention, and he believes he should have it. He's quite bright, and he wants the world to know who he is.
When it became time for the Bachelorette to choose number 1, number 2, or number 3, she said,
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take 1.
Number 1. That's your number 1. All right. This is your date to Rodney Alcala. Rodney, come on and say hello.
She seemed very excited about seeing him. And when he came around, I would say it was a pretty lukewarm togetherness.
She called the office the next day and spoke to Ellen.
She said, Ellen, I can't go out with this guy. There's weird vibes that are coming off of him. He's very strange. I'm not comfortable. Is that going to be a problem? And of course I said no.
I would be very interested in knowing what happened in the days after when the person who chose him would not date him.
Jill Parento was a 21-year-old college student and data entry worker. She lived in an apartment by herself.
On June 13th, she went to a Dodger game and came home and was never heard from again.
The next day, she never showed up at work.
When law enforcement entered her home, she was found in her bedroom. Her body was lying next to the bed, very similar to Charlotte Lamb's, where she was laid on her back, fully naked. She had a pillow up behind her back that propped her breasts up.
So this is, again, another avoidable set of killings by this guy that should have stayed in prison. But he didn't even break stride on the continued crimes that he kept committing.
My mom's plan was to shoot Alcala.
In those days, they didn't have metal detectors, and they didn't use them, so she got into the courtroom.
She really didn't care about anything else at that point. She wanted to avenge her daughter.
In 1979, Rodney was living at his mother's house, where he had a separate entrance, and perhaps he lived there because he didn't have to pay any rent.
He had taken a lot of nude photos, and he would send these photos to New York and get paid for them. And they would go into pornography magazines. That's what he did.
Not only was Rodney on the lam for 3 years, 10 most wanted, 34 months in prison for tally, 2.5 years in prison for a felony of giving drugs to a minor. He's out. He's free. He's on the prowl again.
On June 20th, 1979, Rodney Alcala leaves his mother's house and drives to Huntington Beach. And he starts in a place called Sunset Beach, which is a little bit north on Pacific Coast Highway, and he runs into a 17-year-old girl on roller skates named Lori Wirtz.
I was with my friend Patty, and we decided to go to Sunset Beach. We were approached by Alcala.
And he says, I'm a photographer, and hey, if you could just, skate this way, I'll take some photos.
And I said, oh, that's okay, I'll just help him out.
And there's a series of these photographs that are taken by Rodney Alcala. He was a formally trained photographer, which really played into his method of luring these women and young girls into vulnerable positions.
It's my opinion with regard to Rodney that deviant behavior is always preceded by deviant fantasy. The taking the pictures, going around looking for little girls, sizing people up.
It's a part of the constellation of the Rodney Alcala killing machine. The encounter with Lori Wirtz is very important for two different reasons. Number one, it shows that he's actually down in Huntington Beach that day, which he later denies. And it also shows that he's actively hunting for his next victim.
He was asking me all kinds of questions, like where I'm from, my name, my age. He tried really hard to get me in the car. He tried to get me in the car and leave my friend on the beach.
She doesn't bite, won't get in his car.
He started to drive away, and I did see that he was driving toward Huntington Beach.
Huntington Beach in 1979 in June was chock full of kids and sunbathers and rollerbladers and people walking on the boardwalks and just having fun.
The vibe in Huntington Beach back in the 70s was pretty easygoing. You felt safe.
Robin Samso was a 12-year-old, blonde, blue-eyed poster child for athleticism and healthy lifestyle.
I'm Robin's oldest sister. We are 2 of 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls.
Robin was the baby of the family. Her brothers, sisters, mother all doted over Robin.
She always had a spirit about her. I mean, everybody that met her fell in love with her.
Rodney Alcala winds up on the beach talking to Bridget Wilbert and Robin Samso.
When Robin and I crossed 14th Street is when I believe he spotted us.
And what he's doing is he's saying, hey, I'm a photographer, you're beautiful, you could be a model, how about you let me take pictures?
And I was having none of it. I was like, no. And he reached out and put his hand on Robin's leg. And that's when I grabbed her. I said, no, this isn't good.
So one of the moms comes over and is like, who are you? Why are you talking to him? And he scurries off like a cockroach.
Robin had to be at a dance class at 4 o'clock, so she and Bridget went back to Bridget's house.
It was time for Robin to be going because she needed to be in the ballet studio to answer phones. That was how she paid for her ballet.
Robin was running late, so Bridget let her use her bike.
Go get my bike. I said, and don't stop. It was very important to me to say that.
He's in his car. He had maps to Southern California. He had blacked out windows. He had this rolling trap to try to get people in it.
And then my house phone rang. It was one of Robin's brothers. And he said, is Robin still with you? Has she left? Because she hasn't shown up to ballet.
And there's not a sign of anything. No bike, no person on the side of the road, nothing.
Mom began to worry, and still an hour or so later, when Robin still hadn't returned, she called the police to file a missing persons report.
That was my mom's baby, and my mom cried every day.
Bridget was later introduced to a sketch artist to compile a composite of the individual they'd been talking to on the beach.
And when I was done, I was like, that's him. That is him.
It's Rodney Alcala. I mean, you look at that and it's Rodney Alcala.
Approximately 12 days after Robin went missing, a park ranger in the Sierra Madres at a location called Chantry Flats located some human remains.
But she's been scavenged. And what that means is animals have eaten her.
During their search of the area, they also found a shoe that was identified as belonging to Robin and a beach towel.
And that's how they found this beautiful 12-year-old girl.
I remember I was laying on the couch and the doorbell rang. And I answered the door, and it was the police. They came in and they told us that they had found Robin. And my mom broke down, as well as everybody else, my brothers and I. It was devastating.
Her mother, wanted to see her daughter's body, and they had to explain to her that there is no body. There's a skull and there's bones.
My mom she was never the same. It's like her life just had this big empty hole and everybody else was just on the outside looking in.
They arrest Rodney Alcala at his mother's house in Monterey Park.
After that, they obtained a search warrant for his mother's residence where he was living.
They get inside Rodney Alcala's residence and they see a receipt for a self-storage facility in the city of Seattle. So in really good heads-up police work. Paperwork is not a part of the search warrant, so they cannot collect it. But it's in plain sight, so they write down the information.
One of his sisters went to visit Alcala in jail, and they started talking about the storage locker.
And Rodney Alcala is overheard saying words to the effect of, well, it's good that they don't know about the storage locker.
The cops actually overheard the conversation.
And they get inside and they find a treasure trove of evidence. I mean, it breaks the case. They arrest Rodney Alcala, they bring him to Huntington Beach, and they interview him.
Can you throw around
After the police interview him, he's very savvy and he gives up very little information and he essentially denies all wrongdoing. They get up to this storage locker in the city of Seattle.
They find thousands of pictures of young people, older people, all kinds of people in compromised positions.
They also find various forms of jewelry, a bunch of different earrings and little keepsakes. Those are trophies.
For Rodney, it's his vehicle for power and control. That's why he keeps things.
I remember them asking my mom to the police department to come and identify some things that they found at a locker in Washington.
Two of the earrings found were gold ball earrings. Robin was described as wearing those earrings on the day that she disappeared.
In 1980, Rodney Alcala was tried for the murder of Robin Samso.
One of the stories that Marianne Connolly, Robin's mom, told was that during the 1980 case, she actually showed up with a gun.
Her plan was to shoot Alcala. She really didn't care about anything else at that point. She wanted to avenge her daughter.
In those days, they didn't have metal detectors, or they didn't use them, so she got into the courtroom.
I remember she was very calm. She just kept saying, everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay.
The trial began, and she had her hand on her purse, and she was ready to kill the man who had murdered her daughter.
I do remember her telling me that she heard Robin's voice, and told her not to do it. So she had changed her mind.
On May 8th, 1980, the jury on the Robin Samsoe case deliberated less than 5 hours.
Rodney Alcala was convicted and sentenced to death. He was taken to San Quentin, where he was put on death row. Several years later, an appeal came up. And to everyone's shock and sorrow and horror, the case was repealed.
The verdict was overturned by the California Supreme Court because the justices determined that the jurors in the trial had been improperly informed of Alcala's prior sex crimes.
I think that there's been a gross miscarriage of justice for being found guilty of something that I didn't do.
In 1984, we learned that Alcala was getting a new trial. Once again, my mother was completely destroyed.
Just can't believe that we have to be punished for what he did. And that's really what it amounts to. We're the ones that are being punished. It means nothing to him.
In the 1986 retrial of Rodney Alcala, a new prosecutor was assigned. He was very confident in his ability to be able to get a conviction on that. 7 years to the day of Robin Samsoe's disappearance, the second jury convicted Rodney Alcala and also recommended that he be sentenced to die.
The second time he was found guilty, and he got the death penalty again, and we were extremely happy.
One would think that's the end. He's now going to spend the rest of his life on death row until he gets executed. Well, that wasn't the case. In 2001, Rodney's death penalty was again overturned.
At this point, it's important to remember that Rodney Alcala has been in custody ever since being accused of murdering Robin Samsoe in '79. He's now 58 years old, and life behind bars has taken its toll, not only on Rodney Alcala, but also on the victims' families who've been trying to achieve justice.
Twice Alcala has been convicted and sentenced to death. Twice the convictions were reversed on appeal.
The main reason was an ineffective assistance of counsel claim, meaning that Rodney's attorney had not put forth a strong enough defense on his behalf.
My mom really kind of lost it then.
Every time this happens, it's like losing Robin all over again. I don't know if you've ever lost a child, but there's nothing that hurts like that. Nothing.
Amazingly, at this point, Rodney Alcala has escaped the death penalty 2 times, and now these victims and these families are going to be turning to me and my team to ensure that he's punished for this once and for all. This case was assigned to me back in 2003 when my boss came in and essentially gave me the rundown on it and said that it was going to be a tough one.
That's when Matt Murphy decided to go back to the evidence. And he had that pouch of jewelry that was recovered in the Seattle storage locker reanalyzed for DNA.
Which meant that Rodney's DNA could be put up against the DNA that had been taken decades earlier from the people whom we all believed he had murdered. The DNA matched Charlotte Lamb, Jill Parenteau, Georgia Wickstead, and Jill Barkham.
At that point, Rodney Alcala is clearly now known as a serial killer.
When you get a case like this, the first thing you do is you meet with the family members, and it really drives you. And they say you see the reflection of your victim in the eyes of the people who love them.
I forget a lot of things, except the most important thing I can't forget, and that's her and how she died.
I was the same exact age as Robin Samsoe. We were both 12 years old in 1979, and you connect with your victim.
Matt Murphy was a young, talented, brilliant prosecutor, and the Alcala case would be his 107th homicide.
And now we're going to be in one of my courts in front of one of my judges, and I was going to do everything I could to make sure that he faced justice for what he did.
The third death penalty trial was set for 2010.
Matt Murphy and I ended up being co-counsel on the case once we brought our LA cases down to Orange County.
So we had all these really good professionals that came together.
I came to know Rodney Alcala by being on the Orange County panel of expert witnesses. I met with Rodney. We met a total of 18 hours over a number of days.
And this third time around, 66-year-old Rodney Alcala decides he'll represent himself.
He is a narcissist. He has a genius IQ measured by some. So he's very brilliant and thinks that that translates into being able to be a good lawyer for himself in the case.
Alcala's choice to represent himself was a message to Mr. Murphy that he is equal to him. Mr. Alcala's perceptions about his own superiority should never, ever be underestimated.
She'd been gagged with a t-shirt shoved down her mouth. I wanted the jury to see the level of violence because one of the things that we needed to prove was torture, so that we needed to prove he intended to inflict pain on these victims.
Alcala would strangle the women into unconsciousness, wait till they wake up, and then strangle them again. He knew exactly what he's doing, and he enjoyed what he was doing.
So these are the facts of the Samso case.
Because Rodney Alcala was representing himself, he got to cross-examine the witnesses, and then, of course, questioned Robin Samso's mom.
This is what they look like.
He was questioning my mother about the earrings, trying to create doubt. Alcala tried to argue with my mother.
All the jury sees is the man who murdered this poor woman's daughter cross-examining her.
It was so hard watching her that I think the three of us just sat there and sobbed.
Robin Samso's day in court is today. You make sure that he is held responsible for what happened to that little girl.
Murphy in his closing arguments, I mean, they were fantastic.
He got her into his car, and he drove her up to those mountains. And Rodney Alcala smashed her face in when she was still alive. He brutalized her.
He was rattled after my closing argument, because that's when he first learned, he wasn't as smart as he thought he was.
The day the verdict was read, the courtroom was very still and very quiet.
We, the jury, further find and affix the degree thereof, murder in the first degree.
The verdict was guilty on all charges, across the board, all 5 murders. The evidence that we put in for the penalty phase of the trial focused largely on his prior sexual assaults of Tali Shapiro.
When Matt reached out to me in 2010, he was pretty adamant that he really needed me to come forth and help put Alcala away.
So now we've come full circle from 68 to 79. So bringing Tali Shapiro in as the one who lived, as the one who got away, is very important for a jury to see what a monster Rodney Alcala is.
I was there for the Samso family. I've never been the victim. I've always been the survivor.
If you decide that the death penalty is appropriate punishment, you shouldn't feel too good about it.
After hearing all the evidence, the jury went back to deliberate one more time, and they came back with a verdict in a little less than 2 hours.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, determine that the penalty to be imposed upon defendant Rodney James Alcala to be death.
I feel like Robin's life meant something, even in 12 years. She stopped him from killing anybody else. And I believe that if you would have told her that God was going to use her for this purpose, she would have been okay with it.
I just pray that I live long enough to watch him be executed. I only wish that I could be the one to administrate the injection.
In 2019, the state of California placed a moratorium on the death penalty. So that meant that all prisoners on death row, and this included Rodney Alcala, received a stay of execution. This did mean, though, that Robin Samso's mother would not see Rodney Alcala executed.
July 23rd, 2019, my mom passed away. She wanted to see that day that Alcala leaves this earth, that he just does not breathe anymore. And it's unfair. It's unfair. Somebody so cruel and evil.
Cold case investigators tonight saying they have solved 2 of New York City's most notorious murders.
New York had been investigating cases involving Rodney Alcala, a murder in 1971 and a murder in 1977.
Although Alcala is already on death row in California, he will be extradited here to go on trial for killing the 2 New York women.
They decided to charge Rodney with the 2 New York murders.
He conceded that he did kill the 2 women in question.
I was surprised that he pled guilty. I think ultimately he knew he was going to be convicted.
Mr. Alcala got 25 years to life, which is the highest sentence under the law.
After the trial, the Huntington Beach Police Department released hundreds of the photos that they found in that Seattle locker to the general public. Police don't know if any of the people in these pictures were victims of Alcala, but hope the public might be able to help identify them.
After the Huntington Beach Police Department released those photographs, the decades-old mystery of Christine Thornton was about to come full circle.
My son sent this email to me with all these pictures in it that the police had from a serial killer. That was her. That was definitely her. I think, having Christine being gone for so long, it was difficult because, we all knew that something bad had happened to her.
For nearly 40 years, Christine Thornton's family assumed she was dead. She just vanished out of their lives.
In '82, this herder out in the middle of nowhere comes across a pile of bones, obviously human remains.
Several initial deputies responded along with detectives, and what they found was it was a body of a 25 to 35-year-old female.
They also found the bones of an unborn child mixed in, largely all intact. The clothing was still there. Even some jewelry were all located.
They couldn't determine a cause of death. What they believed was that it was possibly a strangulation because one of the pant legs was tied in a ligature.
The detectives at that time they used the skull and sent it off to the crime lab in order to get a reconstruction of what they felt this person looked like. They determined that it was a young female and brunette.
They unfortunately weren't able to identify her, and the case went cold. In 2013, several of the detectives, including myself, were assigned specific cold cases. So this box was almost falling apart when I initially was assigned this case. There was still bone fragment and skin tissue saved at the crime lab after all those years.
If you have DNA, you run it. And then you try to find out by sending it down through CODIS and missing persons to find out if you can get a match.
CODIS refers to the Combined DNA Index System. It was created in 1998. DNA is entered into a national database, and this helps the authorities find missing people and also solve crimes.
I was basically told it was now a waiting game. I honestly thought I'd be 10, 20 years retired before I'd get a phone call saying that they'd identified her.
So in 2013, my son sent an email to me knowing that he had an aunt that he had never met. He knew the story, that she went missing, and he came across this article with all these pictures in it that the police had from a serial killer.
Her son found the website that had all the pictures that they found in Alcala's locker up in Seattle.
She looked through all these photographs and kept stopping at that one photograph of beautiful brunette seated on the back of a motorcycle.
And I'm like, I think that's Chris. And sure enough, I looked at her little pinky toe, which I remember. It just was very distinctive. It curled up on her other toes. And, you know, I kind of knew that that was her. That was definitely her.
At that point is when she decided to submit her DNA sample as a reference to hopefully identify Christine.
Detective Sheeman came to my office to tell me that they had a match and an identification.
Just shy of 2 years later is when I was off duty and I decided to check my email. The email I received identified my victim from Granger as Christine Ruth Thornton. So this is the copy of the photo that was found in Rodney Alcala's possession. Trying to match this photo out in the Granger Prairie seems almost impossible, but we were able to match this photograph up just based off of two different ridges. You can actually hold this picture up and actually show that this is almost the exact area that this photograph potentially was taken back in 1977. And here we are in 2020. It was pretty shocking to find this area and to know what transpired here all those years ago. We spoke to detectives with the Huntington Beach Police Department and put a timeline together.
So in July of 1977, with the permission of his parole officer, he's allowed to travel back to New York. And Rodney Alcala wasn't flying. Rodney Alcala was driving. So Rodney Alcala leaves New York, comes back to Los Angeles.
And we determined around the time that Christine was killed, he had been traveling across the nation. The motorcycle was actually owned by Rodney Alcala, and they were able to find that motorcycle in his possession.
There's no rhyme or reason how these two people, one so good and one not, cross paths and end up there.
I thought we had enough evidence to possibly charge him, but before we did that, I wanted to speak with him.
I've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews in my career, but I told myself, how the hell do you interview a serial killer?
It's 2016, 6 years after Rodney Alcala has been convicted for the murders of Robin Samso and the other women. He's 73 years old and his health is failing. He's confined to a bed at Corcoran State Prison, and that's where Wyoming officials come to confront him for the murder of Christine Thornton.
As we got in there, it was dingy-colored peach in Alcala's medical cell.
It was like something off a horror movie, paint peeling off the walls, flies buzzing around the room. It's something that I'll never forget, seeing him lying in his bed. And I remember looking at him going, this is him. I identified myself, read him his rights, and we started pulling out photographs of the original crime scene.
Now he knew why we were there.
Does this area look familiar?
And what do you mean by part of your area?
My name is it's scary.
I couldn't believe it. It's almost like it's his killing field. We also showed Rodney Alcala the picture of Christine seated on the back of his motorcycle, and it gives me chills even today to remember his reaction.
Talk to me about the picture. What picture? The picture that you're pointing at. What's on your mind? Talk to me. God, talk to me. Tell me about that girl.
He took his finger and he started tracing her body on the photograph. And then he started tapping on the photograph and kept doing that for a couple more minutes.
That's a guy who wants to relive it again. It empowers him, right? He would relive that.
You could see his eyes moving in his eyelids, almost like he had relived that moment, that entire moment for however long it lasted with Christine out in the desert.
Do you know her? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Do you remember taking this picture?
Yes.
Okay. Now the question is, Mr. Alcala, how did she end up dead? Did you kill her? Yes or no, sir?
When it comes to the big question, he's not going to give it to you. But we got him to admit that he was there. And we got him to admit that he knew Christine. And that's all we needed.
So Rodney Alcala was eventually charged with first-degree murder in Sweetwater County, Wyoming.
They informed me that he was not able to travel without great expense. And so I made the decision that I was not going to try to bring Alcala back to stand trial in Wyoming.
Best place for Rodney Alcala is exactly where we left him. Seeing that jail cell and that setup that he's in, he's where he needs to be.
It was disappointing that we weren't going to get a conviction on her murder, but the good thing about all of this is that this man has been brought to light as being a serial killer. His victims are still out there.
Over the years, Rodney Alcala was given multiple opportunities to disclose those victims, whether part of plea deals, to avoid the death penalty, but he continuously refused to give up that information.
He has memories that he has kept secret from everyone.
That power gives him gratification, and him having the information on victims and us not knowing it, that's something he wants to take to his grave.
On Sunday, she didn't answer us, and neither on Monday.
The only communication that they had, seemingly from her, was by text message.
When details started to appear of what had actually happened, it causes a lot of concern, a lot of fear as well.
You could surmise that she'd been strangled or that the cord had actually caused her death.
A lot of the neighbours would have been shocked, but also extremely puzzled as to how this could have happened.
We were suspicious about the lies. It's big lies, you know?
I live every day with the fact that I was friends with a murderer.
At the edge of London lies the village-like suburb of Kew.
Kew is one of the most sought-after areas of London. It's in West London.
Kew is an extremely wealthy area. It's within commuting distance of the City of London, and it's wonderful nature beside the river and the Royal Botanic Gardens.
It's very leafy. It's a very well-to-do kind of area. It's fairly low crime as well. So it's a nice area for people to live in.
There is definitely a villagey feel. We have a very small high street. You will find a lot of independent trades around Kew, which I think that's what people like.
There's a lot of artists and TV celebrities, and of course Sir David Attenborough lives there. It's a world-class site.
Kew was the perfect place for aspiring French filmmaker Laureline Garcia-Bateau to set up home in 2009.
Laureline was my best friend, my close friend. She was like a sister to me. We always be united. We always be in touch. We just developed a friendship, more than a friendship. Our children called her Auntie Lolo, and my daughter has her name. She was family.
She was a vivacious, very popular, well-liked young woman who was beautiful on the inside as well as on the outside. She was easy to like and was a very caring and considerate kind of person.
The future seemed bright for Laureline, and London was the place to help make her career ambitions come true.
She was born in Aix-en-Provence, but she came to London to pursue her dream of becoming a film producer.
Laureline had a lot of passion, but she developed a real passion for cinema. She was a passionate people. She was a determined people. She was a hard worker. She started her own production company. She got a Grammy as a production assistant on a movie with Dame Joan Collins. For us, it was nice and amazing, but I know for England was a dream, and it was a dream.
Despite a successful career, Laureline was happiest at home with her dogs.
Laureline was a dog lover. She loves animals. She had an Instagram of a video every day with her two dogs, Haley, a husky, and Blake, a Rottweiler. Okay, so nice. They sleep on the bed, and we see that on Instagram every day. It's like they're her children for her.
And on top of her busy life in the UK, Laureline stayed in regular contact with her family in France.
Laureline was very close to her family. Oh yes, she used to call her mom every day, and maybe twice a day, on the morning and the evening. So the family for Laureline is everything. Family and friends, and that was everything.
In March 2019, Laureline was due to move out of her flat in Kew into a new place. Something friends and family were eagerly waiting to hear about.
On Sunday, she didn't answer us, neither on Monday, and it was already strange.
Certainly raised alarm bells the fact that Laureline had not spoken to her best friend and her mum and her family when she would normally speak to her mum every day and speak to her best friend very regularly as well. So the only communication that they had seemingly from her was by text message.
But there was something unusual about Laureline's texts.
Her friends had received some strange text messages from her that didn't really chime with the kind of person that they knew her to be. For example, her best friend said that she thought it was strange that she said that she was going on a shopping spree in Oxford Street because she knew that she usually shopped online and got all her clothes from online retailers. She'd described how she was looking forward to getting a boob job and liposuction. Certainly not the kind of thing that she would have said. So this kind of thing immediately raised alarms, and they were very, very concerned that she just seemed to be communicating by text message, but nobody had seen her.
Confused by Laureline's strange behaviour, her sister-in-law makes her way to the property in Kew.
And when she couldn't find her, she alerted the police.
Laureline was reported missing on the 6th of March 2019, and that means that a police officer would be dispatched to talk to her about her concerns and take a report. The missing persons inquiry started with questions to her sister-in-law and potentially any friends that could be found to say, have you seen her? Can you tell us when you last saw her? And the concern was raised because her sister-in-law had visited the address and she could hear dogs barking, Laureline's dogs, and no sign of Laureline. Laureline was a lover of dogs, so she would never leave her dogs alone. They were her children, essentially, at the time. And also, because it was now Tuesday, Laureline had failed to turn up for work, so work colleagues were now concerned. So you had a lot of people voicing their concern about where Laureline was, and that made it a concern for the police because this was completely out of character and completely unusual behaviour.
Police begin their inquiries by also visiting Laureline's address.
In a missing persons inquiry, police will attend an address, the place where the person lives, because within that premises you might find something to indicate where they've gone. It might be a ticket, it might be a receipt, it could be anything. And also you want to make sure that they haven't come to harm behind locked doors. So there would be a natural instinct for officers to get into that premises, and quite often that's by breaking in to check on the welfare of somebody, and that's what they did in this case. The officers went in, searched the premises, and she was not anywhere. But what officers could see inside that address was the boxes all still ready to be packed.
It looked as if she was just about to move out. Her belongings were all boxed up, ready, as if she was about to move out of the flat straight away. So it looked like the home had been disrupted in some way.
Back at the police station, officers assess the risk of Laureline's disappearance.
A missing person is graded low, medium, or high risk, and different things happen at different levels. In the low risk, you've got people who perhaps there's no particular harm that you can think, they might just have gone away, and the concern is quite a low for them. Medium risk, slightly more work is done around that because people are concerned, but it might be within their character to go away for a weekend or something like that. So it's not necessarily out of character. Whereas you have the high risk category, and that's where Laureline sat, because this was completely out of character.
After reviewing the case as high risk, police returned to Laureline's address for a more detailed search.
They went out into the garden using torches. And in the garden, they had a look around and they could see various items leaning up against a fence, so a spade, shovel, other items that you would use in general gardening, and a bag of compost as well on the right-hand fence. And one of the officers then turned attention to the flower bed on the left-hand side as you walked into the garden and noticed that it was completely brand new in one section. The CID officer moved the soil back closest to them and identified what they thought was the shape of a foot sticking out in essentially a shallow grave. And just a few more scrapes to see what was there made them believe that what they had found was indeed a body.
Police searching for missing French filmmaker Laureline Garcia-Bateau have discovered a body buried in her back garden.
As soon as you find a body in a shallow grave in a premises, it becomes a murder inquiry straight away because that person doesn't put themselves there. And that's when the process of the team start to make their own inquiries, and all the different actions that come out of that initial deployment begin in earnest.
With a murder investigation in progress, Police secure the scene.
You had a lot of this area all cordoned off, a lot of crime scene tents here, because as you bring items out of the garden as well, you need to put them somewhere which is forensically sterile. And so we try to utilise the area out the back of the premises for that reason. So here really behind the house, the alleyway that we used, and trying to set up a forensic retrieval here was quite difficult because the wind was so strong that it was hard. And obviously knowing how detailed you've got to be and how, you know, to avoid any contamination because it is windy and also you're dealing with an outside scene, it's particularly more complex than you would expect an inner scene to be.
Arrive on scene, having been called by the homicide assessment team, usually, and we'll receive a briefing from the local borough police about what the incident involves and why it may be suspicious. Once we've had a briefing, we'll be wearing protective clothing, mask, overshoes, gloves, scene suit, and entering the scene to look for, to see what has occurred.
The crime scene manager is in charge of that scene forensically, whether they be physical exhibits that are taken out of a premises or whether they are swabs or fingerprints. They're in charge of running that scene.
The recovery of the body is totally down to the archaeologist, and he'll work in tandem with an anthropologist. Their speciality is bone analysis, who died, how they died and where they died. Working together, they can rapidly maximise the recording, interpretation and recovery of the body.
As the team removes several inches of soil, it becomes clear that the individual is in fact female.
Obviously, your first thought is, well, Laureline Garcia Bartu is missing, and we have a body in the garden, and it's suspicious that she's missing. So, obviously, my thought is straight away, well, this is probably going to be Laureline. But you don't go to a family with probablys. You have to be sure.
As forensic archaeologists continue digging, the level of brutality on the victim becomes clear.
Once the body was removed from the ground, she was lying on her back, naked. She was wrapped in a mattress, and there was silver duct tape around the area of where the knees and the neck were. The mattress was then wrapped in a cord around the middle of it, but around her neck she had an electric wire. She had a head bag on, and her arms were tied behind her back with duct tape. You could surmise that she'd been strangled or that the cord had actually caused her death. You couldn't see the rest of the body to determine what else was there. She may have been stabbed for all we knew, but that wouldn't be able to be looked at until we got to the mortuary.
As the body is taken to the mortuary to establish a cause of death and identify the victim, news of a murder spreads.
For a young woman's body to be dug up in a garden in Kew, it would have been, you know, almost unheard of in a neighbourhood like that. A lot of the neighbours would have been shocked, but also extremely puzzled as to how this could have happened.
I haven't ever heard of a murder in Kew.
It's quite shocking to hear a murder in Kew. It's not normally the norms of anything.
When details started to appear of what had happened, people become very concerned about, you know, something that's happening in your neighbourhood. It causes a lot of concern, a lot of fear as well.
At the mortuary, the post-mortem gets underway.
Once the body arrives for the post-mortem, he would look at both sides of the body for any bruising, any wounds, anything that stands out to him. There was no obvious bruising around the neck, but once you get the body opened up and get under the skin, then the bruising can be seen. Be checking the hyoid bone, the bone under the neck, see if it's fractured, and then it results in the conclusion that death had been compression of the neck believe via strangulation.
With a cause of death established, it isn't long before the individual is identified as none other than Loreline Garcia Berteau.
I was in my car alone, and I just remember that it was Loreline's mother I had on phone. So I just say the word, is it her? Is she dead? And I hung up. I remember I screamed. I never screamed like that. It's taken a part of me. She was like my little sister, you know? It's taken a part of me.
The investigation into Loreline's murder ramps up, and initial theories are considered. Could this be a burglary gone wrong?
It's a very attractive area for a burglar because there's a lot of assets there.
So if someone's forced their way into the address and killed somebody, and then that person has disappeared, we need to identify them as soon as we can. So we'll be looking to make a light source examination, any finger marks that are not seen to the naked eye. Fingerprint examination. We'll be looking for any DNA that we can find, possibly cigarette ends. Things have been moved by the suspect. He may have opened drawers, cupboards, so we'll be looking to examine those, DNA. He may have cut himself somewhere, so he may have drops of blood that he's left behind.
But a closer examination begins to cast doubts on a suspected burglary.
If it had been a burglary gone wrong, you wouldn't expect them to hang around and attempt to hide the body in the way that it had been.
Police take into consideration Loreline's plans to move home around the time of her murder.
Could the movers have been involved? Could it have been a handyman that had, come round and helped box up her belongings?
After making their inquiries, police discovered that no removal firm had attended the address. So focus switches to Loreline's personal life.
Certainly from her communication with her friends, it was suggested that when she'd last spoken to her sister-in-law, she was looking forward to going on a date with a vet that she'd met. But it was very unclear whether that date had actually taken place or who he was, even. There was very little information given. Who had she been talking to online, on dating apps? Maybe she met somebody else. That was certainly something that could be unravelled through looking into her mobile phone and computer.
Police decide to try to look into Loreline's last movements to see if they hold any clues.
You look at things like Loreline's finance, so where has she spent money? Which indicates that she might have been to a certain place, like a restaurant, which we found out on Friday the 1st. She'd been to a restaurant, and then that venue itself has CCTV.
The CCTV shows Loreline dining with a man, with the pair holding hands. And inquiries with those closest to Loreline soon identifies him.
Loreline was in a on-off relationship for quite a number of years with a man called Kirill Belarusov. And this relationship had been going on for 8+ years, but had kind of fizzled out a couple of years beforehand, but they still saw each other on and off. And so they were aware that Kirill was in the UK as an Estonian national, in the UK to come and help her move that weekend.
Police continue to scour CCTV around the area. Both are later seen on bus CCTV, heading in the direction towards Loreline's home in Kew. It seems Kirill may have been one of the last people to see Loreline alive. But when police try to locate him, they find they are too late.
They had discovered that Kirill was actually no longer in the UK. He had flown to Tallinn in Estonia,
Belarusov has left the country.
Police investigating the murder of Laureline Garcia Bateau want to speak to her ex-lover, Kirill Belarusov, as he may have been one of the last people to see her. But police discover that he has left the country.
The CID officers got in contact with Kirill Belarusov via a telephone number they had for him, which was given to them by the family. And they made contact straight away. He behaved like he didn't know what had happened, and the last time he saw her, she was alive.
Kirill tells police he was helping Laureline move on the Saturday, before she left Kew to move to a new address. But when asked further about this last encounter with Laureline, he doesn't give clear answers.
He was being obstructive, in our opinion. He kept avoiding the question. I wanted him back in the country because I wanted to speak to him face to face. But he kept making excuses why he wasn't coming back, or saying, yes, I'm just going to sort it out, and then nothing would happen. He could do everything he could to come back. He was saying he'd be back on one day. That day would go past. We'd ring him and he'd say, I couldn't make it, I'm going to do another day. And this just kept pushing back and pushing back. And you get to a point where you think, well, that's enough. I know he's trying to avoid him coming back.
I think the fact that Belarusov is not keen to help the police in their inquiries, considering that Laureline had been his partner for the best part of 10 years, is extremely suspicious. And the fact that he left the country around the time of her disappearance as well would have raised alarm bells.
Kirill Belarusov soon became the #1 suspect in the inquiry.
But with Kirill refusing to come back, police need to apply for an extradition order.
The police have a fairly complicated process to get someone back from another country. The British police can apply for a European arrest warrant, which is what they did. So they applied to get Belarusov back from Estonia, where he was at the time.
But for the Crown Prosecution Service to agree, the police need to prove they have enough of a case against Kirill.
When you get a European arrest warrant, as this was, when you bring them back into the country, you have no power to interview them. So you have to do everything without asking them a question, which is very, very difficult because you're not giving, firstly, someone the ability to explain, but also you have to reach that threshold of evidence, which means that as soon as they set foot back in this country, you can charge them straight away with the murder.
With police needing to build a firm case against Kirill, they start to dig into his life.
I met Kirill whilst working in a nightclub. It was called Egg, and we started working together, and that's how we met. Kirill was very charming. He was very nice. He was not, arrogant or trying to tell his side of the story. He was always waiting for you to ask a question before bragging or saying anything. Kirill told me about Laureline when we met. He didn't say her name, but he mentioned that he had an ex-girlfriend that he was really in love with, and that they broke up.
But Sabrina recalls how Kirill later spoke in more detail about his and Laureline's relationship and claims she had cheated on him.
He mentioned that he'd had cancer before and that he couldn't have babies anymore, and that one time his ex fell pregnant and she didn't know that he couldn't have babies, and that's how he found out that she cheated, and that's how the relationship ended. He would always say that it was his fault and that she was very caring and that it was hard on her, the fact that he had cancer. So he wasn't blaming her, but he was saying that's how they ended it.
Sabrina remembers the last time she saw Kirill before he left the UK for his home country of Estonia.
The last time I saw Kirill, he told me before that he was going to die, that his cancer was terminal, and that was the last time I was ever going to see him. He said he sold his house, I'm about to die, let's go dinner. And I went to that restaurant crying. I cried most of the night saying, I'm going to lose my friend.
With police still unable to question Kirill to see if his account of his illness is true, they turn to Laureline's finances to try to establish her whereabouts the weekend of her murder.
Through continued interrogation of finances, we see that on Saturday, round about 10:15 in the morning, that there are transactions in Pets at Home and Sainsbury's, all local to where Laureline lived. So again, officers are there as quickly as possible to identify CCTV opportunities. And there you see Kirill Belarusov with Laureline again. So now we know he's with her in the morning.
At a glance, all appears to be fine. But when police look at Laureline's finances a day later on the Sunday, there appears to be no sign of any purchases. Instead, they look into Kirill's finances.
So we start to look at transactions that Kirill might have made as well. And what you could see on Sunday the 3rd of March was Kirill had left premises and had gone to a local retail park, similar to where Laureline and he had been the day before. He'd been to Sainsbury's, been to Homebase, and been to convenience stores through that morning, and was purchasing items which were highly suspicious. They were the rubble sacks that matched the rubble sacks that were found on Laureline's body. He had purchased an axe, which we never found, and he had purchased soil, or compost as it was. And you could see the CCTV of him, identifying him clearly as the person purchasing those items. And so you could say straight away then that it's very, very clear what he was up to. That was now that Laureline had been killed, and he was thinking of ways to dispose of her body.
With Kirill's behaviour raising suspicions, police approached the CPS.
We had to go to the Crown Prosecution Service and prove what we had, using all of the information we had: CCTV, finance, witness statements, the crime scene itself, the condition of Laureline's body. And that was something which is very, very difficult, but we were able to prove at that point that we had enough evidence to secure an arrest of Kirill Belarusov. And that gives you the ability to get a European arrest warrant and bring them back. He was brought back on the 20th of March and charged with the murder of Laureline. Kirill Belarusov will go to court the following day, to a magistrate's court, where, because it's murder, they send it to the Crown Court, and then he's due to enter a plea some 8 weeks later. And that plea is not guilty. So we knew at that point we are going to trial with him at some stage in 2019.
And as the case is prepared for trial, potential witnesses are called in by the police and prosecution.
The police called me saying, "We want to talk to you about your friend Kirill," and I thought they were calling me to say that he was dead. They told me he's been arrested, he's killed someone. I was in shock. I was like, "Are you sure that it is the right person?" And they said, "Yes." You don't murder, you don't think that you knew a murderer?
Kirill Belarusov has been charged with the murder of his ex-partner, Laureline Garcia-Berteau. The trial begins at the Old Bailey in London, and the prosecution open their case against Kirill with DNA evidence from the crime scene.
The flex that was used to tie Laureline's hands behind her back, you could see that flex on the floor in the living room where it had been cut. And indeed, the forensic testing showed that Kirill Belarusov's DNA was at the cut part of that flex.
The jury hears of the early relationship between Laureline and Kirill.
At the beginning, she called him my Superman. He's tall, very helpful, especially with women, you know. He came to spend a few days with Laureline at my home. He ate at my parents' table. He was a Superman. A good boy.
And Kirill had even boasted of his career achievements to Laureline.
He had told people he was a stuntman and that he'd worked on films with famous people like Brad Pitt, and that he was training people. We searched in the industries at Hollywood, and we searched in the UK, IMDb, to see where was he in these films, and they're always shown if you work on there. He was nowhere to be found. These were all complete and utter lies that he told everybody.
But the lies did not stop there.
He began to say to lots of people that he was sick and that he had 10 years left to live.
He didn't talk much about his cancer. You would ask him questions and he would say, I'm bleeding from every hole. I've been puking for the last 3 days. I think it's just once where I said, if you don't mind me asking, what is the cancer? Where is it? And he said, oh, it's the pancreas, it's the liver area. And then the time after he would be like, oh, it's spread everywhere. But he would never give any more details. He'd just say, I'm a guinea pig. They've opened me up and stitched me. They keep on opening me up. But he wasn't very specific.
Loreline's mother, friend, and I found it very strange because he has nothing in front of us. When we saw Kirill, a wedding day or for a holiday, we can't imagine he's sick.
I've never known someone who had cancer. So when I saw him with the shaved head, I didn't question it. I didn't think he still had eyebrows. And I didn't know that you lose your eyebrows when you have chemo.
We were suspicious about the lies. It's big lies, you know? We were suspicious. We tell that to Loreline. We explained to her to open her eyes, but she was in love.
And we were discovering that almost all of his entire life that he told people about was a complete lie. Saying you've got cancer when you don't have, for me, is the lowest of the low.
The prosecution also reveals to the court more about Kirill's double life.
Every time he suggested he was going in for treatment to a hospital in London or just outside of London, what he was actually doing was going to stay with another girlfriend in London. That girlfriend also was told the same lie by him, that he had cancer. So when he was not with her and saying that he was away for a few days, he was going to stay with Loreline.
It's only when I sat down in court that I realized that he was texting the three of us at the same time, his girlfriend, Loreline, and me. So it was really like juggling between the three of us. With me, he was supposed to be in Russia having treatment, and then he was actually in London seeing Loreline, talking to Loreline. I felt like a fool. I felt so stupid. It was so shocking.
The prosecution described that as Loreline's film career began to take off, Kirill may have looked towards her with envy.
He wanted a career in films as well, to a certain extent. He wanted to be a stuntman, but he wasn't, and he couldn't have been because he didn't have the skills to do that. His only skill was lying, whereas she was genuinely talented, and she was very, very hardworking, and she was prepared to earn her place in her chosen career. So I think there probably was an element of jealousy in the relationship.
But it's details of a debt owed to Loreline which could point towards a motive for murder.
She had given him so much money over the course of their relationship, and we knew you were talking plus £17,000 at least at that point. And that was getting to the point where he had to pay that money back. In November 2018, Loreline had sent a message to Kirill, and this was saying, you don't realise how much in debt, how much in trouble I am. I can't pay my rent. You need to pay me the money back. And from friends and family, we would always hear stories where he would promise this money. It's coming, I've got this job, this stuntman job, whatever it might be, which was all lies. So he knew he could never pay that back. That could be one motive. Secondly, she was at that point in her life now where she was ready to move on, away from him. And she was effectively a source of income for him as well. And that was about to dry up.
To the court's surprise, Kirill gives evidence.
I think the most shocking about the trial was himself. He took the stand and spoke, and it was just, I think it lasted 2 days, and it was 2 days of horror. Every word that was coming out of his mouth was horrible. The way he talked about me, the way he talked about Laureline, the way he saw himself, the arrogance in his voice. I remember sitting down terrified because I had been so close to him and just thinking that man is a monster. It was traumatizing.
I always think about the people over the years that have been in front of you in a trial, and he's probably right up there as the most evil-looking eyes I think I've ever seen. And because behind it you can see that he really doesn't care. You know, his image and what he's portrayed himself as is more important than anything else. And he was really, really unpleasant and arrogant beyond belief during the entire 4-week trial at the Old Bailey.
The court hears how in March 2019, Laureline begged Kirill one last time to pay back what was owed to her. But instead, he used this opportunity to kill Laureline.
You have the timeline of them going out on the Friday night, which we can see. We have the timeline of them going shopping on Saturday morning. She had booked a removal company ready for Saturday, but she didn't know where she was moving to because Kirill Belarusov had said he has found somewhere for her to move to. She had no money because he owed her a lot of money. She kept asking him, where am I going? And you could see that through telephone contact. Well, where is this address? I need to tell my removal company where we're going. And so the removal company basically said, well, I can't move you to nowhere. So it was all cancelled. Kirill Belarusov comes up with a new lie. He's organised a removal company for her.
But the removal company never came.
And you get to the point then where Laureline is panicking because she doesn't know where she's going, and she's clearly getting to that point in the evening where, on that Saturday, she's starting to disbelieve what he's saying. And that's when everything goes quiet.
It's at this point that Kirill strangled Laureline with a cord. And the following morning, he was seen in local shops purchasing suspicious items.
Kirill had been out and bought these items on the Sunday morning, which were used to cover the body of Laureline.
After returning to Laureline's home to bury her body, Kirill used her phone to send fake texts to Laureline's friends and family to buy some time.
He foolishly used Google Translate to try and reply to the family members in French, and obviously it's not going to sound very credible. It's not going to sound like Laureline, not the words that she would use, and the translation was extremely clunky, so it was immediately quite suspicious.
And at the time that those messages were being sent, he was using the Wi-Fi of the address itself. So that puts him inside the address using her phone, sickeningly looking at pornography at the same time he's sending these messages, knowing full well that in that house is Laureline's body. And that really shows you what kind of person he is. It's very difficult to comprehend a person who has that kind of personality, that very strange and almost psychotic personality.
By the time concerned family and friends of Laureline get in touch with Kirill about her disappearance, he's leaving the country for Estonia.
I put my phone with video with him. I saw that he was in the airport. So I asked him, you are in the airport and your lovely Laureline is missing. Why are you leaving? There's no explanation, but he leaves.
After a grueling trial at the Old Bailey, the jury returns its verdict. Kirill Belarusov is found guilty of murder and is sentenced to 24 years in prison.
About the verdict, we can't say that we are happy because our friend will never come again. But we are grateful for the jury and the judge to having seen him the real way he is and to not allow him to do that again to another woman.
But even with Loreline's killer behind bars, the impact of his crimes are long-lasting.
Today, we are more mistrusting. Today, when my friend meets a man, I want to know everything. I want to know where she is, the address. It's changed all of our lives.
This entire story definitely had an effect on me. He destroyed so many lives, not just Loreline's. So many people that have been touched by his lies, so many people that believed he was such a nice person. And I think we were all a bit destroyed because we were all fooled and none of us saw anything. And if just one of us saw something, she could still be alive.